Jennifer seconded. Thanks, Mark. And I would like to make a nomination for Tim Hannigan. Can I get a second?
Second.
Can
I do that?
Yeah, sure, why not? Kenny?
Sure.
Okay, so we have Laura and Tim. Would you guys like to make comments? I don't feel the need now. Or do you want to make a comment? Okay, Tim?
I'll make a comment. You know, I kind of recognize that, you know, my last few years on the board have been, you know, at times difficult for the people that are on the board with me. I know that the questions that I ask and how I ask them have made people uncomfortable. And I also do believe that last year when I ran for vice chair, that had something to do with the fact that I wasn't elected vice chair, which is fine. That's the way elections are supposed to work. And I think that we have before the board two candidates that represent a little bit different approach to serving on the board. And I seriously considered not even putting my name forward, but I thought, well, one last time, I might ask the board, is there any value in having someone on the board in a leadership position who is willing to ask some very hard, very uncomfortable questions? And if you think that there's value in that, I'd like your support. I'd like, for the first time, or one of the very few times, I'd like to see some support for that. And I don't expect that I'm right, but I refuse to quit asking the question. And this is kind of a crossroads for me because, you know, I love serving on this board. I very much respect the people that are on this board. And I haven't been perfect. I get that too. But, you know, if I'm going to spend my time on the board, I have to occasionally feel that the effort to ask the hard questions is valued and appreciated. And I don't necessarily feel that way very often. And I guess I would say to you, this is my last ask, whether or not there's any value or appreciation for an effort to try to inject some scrutiny, some representation from the community, and a different way of looking at things. I get that I'm, you know, I provoke thought and questions for the sole purpose of making sure that we work through some of this stuff. And, you know, in the end, I don't expect the vote to always go my way. I don't expect the vote to very rarely go my way. But I do expect every once in a while to maybe move the needle a little bit. And I don't think, well, if I'm not moving the needle, then there's really no value for me to be on the board. And I'm at the crossroads now where I got to make a decision if I'm going to run again. And I'm disinclined, not because I want to pick up my toys and go home and pout, but because I think you deserve a board member who is more to your thinking if my way of thought doesn't have any value. Otherwise, I'm just making trouble for trouble's sake. And so I did put my name forward. You know, I also kind of thought that we were rotating the board chair position. I don't know if Laura's had it before. I thought we were rotating it. And I was actually a little surprised last year when someone ran against me for vice, but maybe I don't understand how the board chair position has rotated or whether or not Laura's been in a rotation. But from my recollection, what I've noted is that it has rotated, and it's rotated without exception for a number of years. And please correct me, anyone who's got more history than me. If I'm wrong about that, tell me. But my perception is it's always rotated, and when I was ready to rotate into it, I think people disagreed with me or my approach enough that they didn't want me in that position, which is, again, you guys, I really respect you, and I don't want to be I don't want to be in a position to continually work to provoke discussion or ask our questions if you guys don't see value in it. And I can't say for sure that I have value in it. I've always adopted this role on a board, and it's typically the first year or two, they hate it. And then after they get to understand that I really don't have a hidden agenda other than just to ask questions out loud in a public forum, force votes in a public fashion. For example, tonight, I thought maybe the administrative compensation was in one of those handbooks, and I was right here ready to say, we're not doing that on a consent agenda. Let's pass it out in the open, let everybody discuss it and vote on it in a public fashion. But it's not, so separate issue. But that's the way that I would go. And so now it's just up to you guys to decide if that's really the way you want things to go.
Yes, sir.
Oh, thank you.
If I could answer one of his questions. Dr. Hopkins and Jean Clifford both served multiple terms as president during their tenures on the board. So it's not just, I don't think, a routine, everybody has sat in that position. And one of the things that I have always valued about this board is the different strengths that everyone brings to this board. For example, I'm horrible with numbers. And I'm really glad that we have people on this board who are good with numbers and good with budgets, who can help ask questions in that area. I find one of my strengths to be reviewing the policies and making sure that the policy language is the way that we want it. So, I mean, I guess I would take issue with with what you said about valuing how you have served in this capacity, because everyone has a role to play in this board, and it's very helpful to make sure that all of that is done. There have been times when I believe I have asked hard questions. I remember sitting in here one time questioning Dr. Asa, and he's like, I don't ever want to be cross-examined by you in court. You know, everyone has that different type of position at different times. So, and it should all be valued because of how we are, and I appreciate how our board has always been with that.
I'd like to make a comment as well. Laura, how many times have you served as president? Once. And how many as vice?
This will be 2.
Okay. So when I came on the board, I wanted to run against Mark, and Tim Cruz talked to me about the precedent that we could set on the board. And it was that everybody who serves on the board should have an opportunity to lead the board. And this isn't a paid position, and I feel like everybody puts the time in and the effort, and we all approach leadership in a very different way, which is valuable and should be valued, and I think we have as a board valued. But again, I think we don't get paid to do this, and I think we should all, when we put in the time, have the opportunity to serve as a leader of this board. I have valued Tim's willingness to ask hard questions, and we all do. Laura has, everybody asks valued questions, but he's put the time in, and I believe that he should get an opportunity to lead the board. Laura has led the board. She's a wonderful leader. I don't know what I would do without her as a vice president, because I constantly skip things, and I'm so ready to step down. This is not an easy role, and definitely some people will excel more than others, but I do believe everybody should have the opportunity to lead the board, and I value Tim Cruz for telling me that Mark had put in the time and it was his turn to lead, and that I needed to wait, and I appreciated that, and I hoped that that would be the precedent that was set for the board. Okay, so with that, Mark, did you want to make any comments?
Yes, thank you very much. I certainly align with some of Laura's comments there, that I really feel like we have a wonderful set of citizens representing our community on the board. You know, each of you bring your strengths, And irrespective of how I vote for our leadership, I continue to value that. And so I think we can't lose as a community and as a board. I guess that's my comments at this point.
Thanks, Mark. Anybody else? Comment? Okay, so we just do each one, or how do we do that?
I would suggest that, because there's been dissension in the past when we've had yays and nays for the individual person, because it's not necessarily a vote against the person.
Sure.
So I would say all in favor of one person and then all in favor of another person and take the vote that way
Okay.
would be my recommendation.
Okay. Is everybody okay with that? Is that, Steve, you're shaking your head. Is that kind of how it's been in the past too? Everybody feels comfortable with that? Mark has a thumbs up. Thanks, Mark. Okay, so we'll go all in favor of Laura. Mark's up. All in favor of Tim, please raise your hand. Okay, Laura will resume the presidency, and we get to do that immediately. Yay. So can I just slide the gavel over?
Should I make a comment?
Sure, Jenny.
Don't quit asking no more questions.
No worries.
Does that work, or did you
Yeah, that's fine.
actually?
That's fine.
That's fine.
You might regret saying that.
No.
If we can, before we move on to the election of vice president, I'm going to exercise a little presidential prerogative that I hope you all will indulge me with. First, I want to take a moment to thank Dana for the leadership that she has provided during the past year. The last part of her tenure was probably not what any of us expected or wanted, yet you handled it with grace and strength. We have grown as a board with setting our standards and goals that we hope to achieve as a district. So Dana, I hope I can speak for the whole board when I say thank you.
Honestly, I think I've not been a great president, but it's been a learning experience, and I really value so much the input, whether it was good or bad, letting me know when I crossed the line or maybe could have done things better. I know I've been challenging for Steve, and I appreciate you continuing to work with me. And honestly, the last part with COVID has nothing to do with me, because I took a back seat, and I'm just couldn't be more proud of our leadership. And so I will not take any credit at all for anything, because that was just a time where I really just took a back seat to everything, and I just couldn't be more proud of all the leadership, including our teacher leadership. So thank you.
I also wanted to thank for the support tonight, and I know we may not always see eye to eye, Dr. Hannigan, but I hope that we will continue to work well this coming year. If nothing that the last few months have taught us, we need to look at what unifies us and what makes us strong. You know, our motto for the fourth quarter of the 1920 school year was 457 strong, which led me to remember one of the keynote speakers from the KASB conference this past December. He was from Gallup, speaking on employee engagement. One of the quotes that he showed in a slide said, let's shift from what's wrong to what's strong. With all that has been going on, I believe we've started to make that shift, but as we continue with the new plans, I hope we keep that mindset. While we need to look at our plans with a critical eye, we must look at the positives and the strengths that we are demonstrating to make the best for our decisions for our students and teachers. Another KSB conference takeaway that I had was having some sort of visual reminder of who we are here for, which is the students. One school district does that by actually having an empty student desk present in the boardroom during their meetings. I'm not sure if we can do exactly that, but I'm hoping that we can have some sort of visual representation to remind us of who we're here for, but not just the students, but also some visual cues for our teachers and the taxpayers as well. I'm looking forward to the innovations that I will know will come from our staff. Yeah, I'm looking at you guys. And how they will address all of the needs and the latest information in the next few days. weeks and months, because we know that will be changing, because we're going to remain 4, 5, 7 strong. So now I will entertain nominations for vice president.
I'd like to nominate Dr. Hannigan.
Okay. We have a motion for, sorry, I'm gonna do this, for Dr. Hannigan. Is there a second? Second. Motion and second for Dr. Hannigan.
Can I decline?
Yeah.
Can I decline?
Okay. Any other nominations?
I mean, I'll do it if you guys want anybody else to do it.
I
I
really
think it
like you
should-
to, but I understand if you don't.
No, I think it should be a training spot for the upcoming board chair. I mean, I always have been. And, I just don't see that in my future. So I think you should put somebody in that's gonna be trained to be the board chair. I would nominate Jean.
I'm sorry, Janine?
Yep. She just got a surprise look on her face. I'm supposed to ask you ahead of time. Are you okay with that?
Okay, guys, I will serve in whatever capacity the board wants.
Is there a second for Janine?
I'm good with that.
Okay. And let that die with lack of a second. Any other nominations?
I would nominate Alex.
Nominations.
Madam President, Alex, I'd like to nominate Alex for vice president. I'm sorry, I was not able to hear very well there. He may have already been nominated.
And can I turn you into a second, Mark?
Yes, that would be fine.
Okay. So moved by Janine and seconded by Mark. I keep expecting Stephanie over there, so I keep looking over there. Any other nominations? Okay, then I'm gonna close the nominations. Do you want to say anything, Alex?
Just thank you for the opportunity, and I look forward to working with everybody, and hopefully a supportive role to you, and like Tim, ask the hard questions to the people that we need to, and be respectful of the students and the taxpayers. Whatever I can do.
Any other discussion or comments? Then all in favor of Alex serving as vice president, please raise your hand or say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Are you gonna vote?
I do.
Okay.
My hand is up.
Okay. Mark? Okay, his hand's up too. Okay. Well, congratulations, Alex. I'm gonna pass this to you. Okay, Stephanie, is there any correspondence? No. Okay. Then, I'll look for a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Madam President, I make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Janine. Any discussion? All those in favor of the consent agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Opposed? Consent agenda passes, and that takes us to the curriculum report update on planning process for 2021.
Ma'am, should I screen share first, or just go right to the PowerPoint? Okay. Mark, can you see my screen?
Yes, I can. It's perfect.
Okay,
So for the Zoom record, my name is Keith Hogan. I'm Deputy Superintendent here with the district, and Glenda and I will be talking a little bit about what's been happening over the last month and a half here at USD 457 as we're planning for the upcoming school year, looking ahead to 2021. So President Moores made mention something along these lines. This quote, "We cannot become what we need by remaining who we are or what we are." And I think that's absolutely evident, and we started through this process of looking at every aspect of school, examining it, whether it's going to change, what needs to change, what needs to address. And I would say that's true with the exception of two things. Number one, student learning is, in my opinion, always been about what USD 457 just is embedded or ingrained. So that's certainly going to stay a priority for us, and also the safety of our students and our staff. So without those exceptions, I think we have been diving into this and looking at what do we need to do to move forward. So another quote, essentially the summary of this is you got to love what you do in order to get through difficult times. And I think we've all been tested through this process just with decision-making fatigue, having unanswered questions, doing the research to find out what other people are doing and keeping things in line with that. So it has been a draining process, but also on that innovative mindset, something that it has been rewarding. So to give you a little insight to our makeup of what's been happening. So we have developed this flow chart to kind of show you about our planning process. So we start with a selection vision team, and that's made up of about 30 different stakeholders. So you can think of that as almost like oversight, if you will. Asking questions, some of these folks are parents, staff members, principals, teachers, department heads, things like that. So they're looking at big picture, kind of 30,000-foot view of what are you going to do about this? What are you going to do about that? Asking those kind of prompting questions, which would then funnel down to two different committees. One separated into instruction and the other in operation. Those are kind of our big ticket items. Glenda's been chairing the instruction side, and KJ and I have been doing the operational side. So within that, it breaks down into subcommittees, and those subcommittees on the operations side are basically all of our departments, our department heads. And then we also have administrators from each level. Again, just kind of giving that perspective of, as we start planning and asking questions and maybe even implementing some plans, thinking about what this would look like, they're going to be boots on the ground, maybe a reality check in some cases, like, that's great, but not going to work. So that's kind of been our checks and balances in terms of that committee. On the instructional side, every different grade level has had representation. So of these 18 committees that we have, probably over 200 people have been involved in that planning process. So not just department heads, but teachers, working together with administrators and central office people, and again, really about thought-provoking, what are you going to do when, or what do we need to consider, and then you'll see these all blend back and forth because of the interaction that has to happen.
One of the things we felt very strongly about this year was making sure that no matter what their feelings were, that we tried to honor parent choice. So we know that there are parents out there that are terrified of sending their children to school because they don't want them to get COVID-19. We know that there are other parents that are saying, please, they've been home now an extra 9 weeks, so can we get them to school really soon? So we wanted to make sure and offer parent choice. So what we're going to do this year is have 3 choices for parents. So they can choose on-site, this is go to the building and be in school, not quite like we've always been, and we'll cover that in just a minute, but as close to normal as we can possibly make it. Then the next option is a remote learning, so a virtual school, if you will. And we've already got teachers that have been hired. We haven't filled all of our positions, but most of them now have been filled. And those teachers are already working on the development of videos and lessons and what that's going to look like so that they can roll them out. We've set up studios at Georgia Matthews for elementary. We've set up studios at Charles Stone and Bernadine sits for intermediate, and our secondary schools are going to use Edgenuity, which is the same program that our virtual school uses. So we've got something for everybody there. And then they can choose an option to blend it. So I really want my child to still take orchestra, or I want my child to maybe go up and get math from the instructor because that's not my strong suit. So they can go and pick out within some scheduling reasons, so probably 2 classes together or 3 classes together, and do the rest from home. So we can't probably do like an every other hour kind of thing, but we can do a blended option for those families that want a blended option. So I mentioned school looking as much like normal as possible. So with that, we've developed a level system in conjunction with the health department, to try to answer some of the what ifs. So the bookends, if you will, are level 1, which is on-site learning, no protective measures required and no restrictions. So that is school as we knew it before COVID hit.
Wait a minute,
Yes.
we don't have that in our packet, the last 2 or 3 slides. You don't, the presentation was updated over what was put out in the packet. You have, did you get this? Yeah, but I see what she got.
It's the same thing.
Okay.
We updated the way it looks possibly from the time, because we had slide by slide, I think, in there originally, and we've gotten the document all together, and we thought this might be easier to look at. So, yes, I think I had 4 slides and I broke it up into chunks. So we just did the document. So level 1 is no protective measures, no restrictions. Then when we go to level 2, we have basic protective measures. And I know this may be difficult to see, but this is daily symptomatic screening by teachers. So first hour of the day, questioning the kids and seeing how they're feeling, and if they hit any of those red flags, I've got a sore throat, I've been coughing all night, then they would go to the nurse. Masks recommended as tolerated, because we know there are those kids that probably can't tolerate a mask. But masks recommended for grades 7 through 12, if not able to social distance, or for grades K-12 at teacher discretion. So we're doing an activity that we can't really social distance, so I'm going to ask the kids to wear their masks, or I'm at risk, or we have a student in our classroom that's at risk. So we want to keep them safe, so I'm going to ask the students in that classroom to wear a mask. Hand washing encouraged before and after lunch and after recess. Small group social distance if possible. Assigned seating, you'll see that all through the levels so that we can contact trace for the health department. So if one of our students does become positive, then we can say this is who sits next to them, and perhaps keep from quarantining an entire group of kids. Modified lunch schedule, so students may eat in the classrooms, or some in classrooms and some in the cafeteria. This again is so that we can social distance. And large group classes outside or social distance. Level 3, again, these are.
Can I interrupt for a second?
Yep.
We don't, not that I can see, we don't have level 3 on this slideshow, so I didn't know if you could send that out after all of them together. So-
Yes, we sure can.
Okay, sorry to interrupt.
Nope, you're fine. So we will send this finished document out. So level 3, the big changes here are masks are required now for grades 7 to 12. And the same applies for K-6, teacher discretion due to at-risk students or staff or activity that cannot be social distance. We are also looking at limiting the mixing of people as much as possible. So trying to keep 4 groups of students together throughout the day so that we don't cross-contaminate. Level 4, with a possible classroom or staff exposure, quarantined students can now participate in remote learning. So we want to make sure that no matter whether they're at home because they're quarantined or they're at school, that students are all getting the same lessons, the same education. So we don't want a student having to miss 2 weeks to be quarantined to then fall 2 weeks behind their peers. So we will offer a remote option to any student then at this point when we get to level 4. The thinking behind that is parents are going to find out that there's a positive in the school, and someone say, I would like my student to stay home at this point. So we want to give them that option and that flexibility of staying home for a quarantine period. There would be no face-to-face groupings at this point. All desks and tables must face the same direction. Masks are required for grades K-12. Hourly hand sanitizing is encouraged. School libraries closed. No indoor PE. No large group activities such as concerts, assemblies, family engagement nights. School playground is closed. Modified school lunch schedule. Students will eat in the classrooms again, or some in the cafeteria. Limit touching and geographic sequestering as possible. One of the things that could potentially happen at this point is we might have a classroom that has a positive, and so we might take measures there to do some remote learning and some in-school learning, but the rest of the building may still be functioning with lesser restrictions.
I'm glad it can, in your So You May Know on Friday, page 27 and 28 should have this, so if you pull that up. I know it's hard to read, so.
Level 5 is hybrid learning only, so we now know that the numbers in the community probably are going up. We have multiple cases, or Mr. Hogan now has more substitutes in the building, or needs more substitutes in the building than he can find substitutes. So we go to an A-B schedule where half of the students are in school at a time. And again, the teachers will then flip the lesson out to the kids that are remote, and we will alternate days. Level 6 is everybody remote learning like we were doing the last 4 weeks or 9 weeks, but fourth quarter. However, with this, though, there will be an accountability piece that did not exist when we were doing continuous learning. Questions on the?
So on the remote hybrid learning, and it's, I probably asked my question, but, does this affect our base dating for people? Because I know in the past, there were that kids had to be a certain amount of time on property or in the schools for them to be counted to get that value. So how does that affect that at all?
Yeah, so we don't have all the final guidance yet, but the state is very aware of that. So students that are involved in the remote or hybrid learning, there will be an accountability piece to account for their time. Their parents will have to sign off on what they've been doing during that time, and we'll have to meet time requirements in order to still count those kids. So they are looking into that. We don't have all the final guidance, but we're hopeful that we can still count those kids.
So the state is, we kind of have a preliminary draft to look at of the guidance that the state board's going to be considering this week, and that's supposed to all be released later this week. I think maybe Thursday is when it's supposed to all go public. So I don't know, based on what we've seen so far, there will be a method. We don't know if that's exactly what it's going to be, but that'll probably be a 1-year thing while this is happening. And the state is aware of the challenge that, on one hand, they're encouraging us to have these kind of options for parents, but they recognize that then we have to be able to get the funding we're expecting to provide the services in that way too. So I guess the best answer is we don't have the exact answer for you, but we do believe there's going to be something in place that's going to allow that. That's
After they try to prorate us.
that's so.
I'm sorry, go ahead. Dr. Hannigan?
2 questions. How do you make the determination of what level you're at?
Input from the health department on what those numbers are. We've already had several meetings with them. We met just last week to kind of fine tune this and talk about what might cause us to go back and forth between levels. And they said, we may have to call them and say, are you aware that we've got this many teachers out at Gertrude Walker? Or we now have 10 kids that are absent in first grade at this building. and then they may call us and say, we just got a positive at KH, and we need to quarantine these kids, or whoever sat around this child. So it's going to be a constant cooperation and back and forth with the health department.
Okay, so we don't know, which is not surprising to me. And probably my thought, best approach is to not try to objectively put in criteria for switching levels, because this thing is so fluid.
Right.
So you're just gonna work with the health department and assess what level you're at based on input from the health department or what you're seeing.
Correct.
Okay.
So, yeah, it'll be a collaborative decision between the school administration, the district administration, and the health department.
Okay.
I think the health department is trying to identify maybe what has happened in some other states to be a little more specific and evidence-oriented, so it's not just a,
Right.
you know, but we are very concerned that if we draw specific lines in the sand, this is a complicated issue that, you know, one indicator might not look very good, but 3 or 4 others may look really good, and so you don't need to get there. So we're still working with them, exactly how that'll be operationalized. The other piece of this that I think is a little hard to get our arms around, but it may not be the whole district that's at level 2. It may be part of the districts, some buildings are at level 2 and some are at level 3. It may even vary by classroom within a building. I don't think it will probably go lower than that. But I will tell you, from our conversations with the health department, I am very pleased in that the current CDC guidelines, now these are the ones prior to the president telling the CDC they're going to rewrite them. We haven't seen the newest ones. But the current CDC guidelines say if there's a COVID positive case in your school, you close the school for 2 to 5 days. Our local health department has told us that they think that's probably excessive. That they think that if there's one positive case in the school, there's a lot of other factors that need to be considered. But that most likely, we might be looking at a classroom or even just a part of a classroom that needs to be isolated. So I'm very pleased that they're taking a reasonable approach to this, and they're understanding that, you know, they're gonna probably try to draw that circle small, and that they aren't just hung up on something that's published. They're trying to look at it from an evidence-based standpoint, but also understand that there are, you know, other factors. When we closed an entire school because of one case, that's a lot of parents that can't go to work, that's a lot of disruption in our community that will have other effects. So I think they are trying to look at that from a point of reason.
My second question was whether, was the health department involved in your decisions about when and when you're not going to require masks?
Yes, several discussions actually, and the entire document has changed probably on a daily basis until the last meeting with the health department, because we've had some of those guidelines, like you said, firm guidelines. I had those over here at the side that said, we're going to move to level 4 when this happens, and then we play out scenarios and found that really is very difficult. But actually, we looked at the American Association of Pediatrics document. We've looked at a document that several of the directors of health departments put together, and then we've met several times with our local health department to look at those guidelines.
And we're meeting with them again on Thursday to continue that conversation.
So the health department is saying that a closed environment like a school bus and not requiring the kids to wear a mask, that's consistent with their idea of what science is telling us, or?
No,
I know you're asking me to speak for the health department, but
right.
it runs counter to everything that I know to be.
Now, I think
So,
he showed you all of the different committees that are going. This is just classroom guidance. So we have a separate guidance document for transportation that I think he's just going to talk about
I think,
in just a little bit.
I guess I read ahead.
Yeah, thinking ahead, so, this is just classroom operations.
What about hallways?
Hallways, it varies upon the level, of course, but when you think about 6 foot and 10 minutes, if everybody keeps moving, we're not going to be standing there talking, then we can keep that under the 10 minutes. None of our passing periods are 10 minutes.
So you think if they're moving, even though they might be talking, but they can talk to the person next to them, you think if they're moving, that environment without a mask,
With the exception of the high school, most of the schools, so what has happened is the schools took this plan, this outline, and then they applied it to their level. And so when we bring back our final document, you will see this document, and then you will see a document for each level, early childhood, elementary, intermediate, on up. Most of them are saying single file, like cars drive. So, you know, if I'm on the right-hand side here, that, you know, you're always walking to your right. So the traffic is going this way in single file. So a lot of them are doing that as we get to the higher levels.
And I think the other thing is the idea with the progressively tighter restrictions is if we start out with some latitude and at level 2, masks are in more cases recommended. If we find that we're having positive cases that would say be tracked back to a passing period, then that would be the kind of reason to move to a higher level of restriction where masks would be required during those passing periods. Does that make sense? I mean, that's the...
It does, except for the fact that at the point that you're moving to some of the more restrictive levels, the cat's out of the bag. Because what we see in terms of positive tests is anywhere from a 2 to 3 week lag from what's actually going on. And when I look at the effort that you're putting into hand washing, the effort that you're putting into social distancing, and all the other efforts that you're putting in, asking a kid to put a mask on when they pass in a hall, or requiring a kid to put a mask on when he passes in a hall, or when he's in a school bus, doesn't seem like too much to ask, given all the other efforts that you're making. And we, I think, are starting to understand that your best protector for the teachers and the faculty and the classified personnel, your best protector is a mask. And it's not for the kids, it's for the people that are around them. And they think, I'm reading now that somewhere close to 50% of the transmission is happening prior to symptoms. 50%. If you don't have the kids in a mask, you're potentially not guarding in a very simple fashion against 50% of the potential transmission. And I sort of acknowledge the need to be practical. So having to force the kid to wear a mask all day, well, having wear a mask all day, I can say that's not going to be easy to do. And I get when you get them all seated, you got their hands clean, you got them all facing in the same direction, and you got them socially isolated, that there has to be some practicality in terms of taking that mask off, especially when you're communicating all day long. In a perfect world, we'd like to see them wear them all the time, but you can't. But to not have them wear masks in that hallway or in the buses, you are, in my opinion, you are completely defeating all of the other things that you're doing. And in fact, the masks are potentially easier than all the other things that you're doing. Put a mask on. Right? I mean, look at all the other stuff you're doing. Why are we not doing that at level 1 or level 2? Because by the time you get to the 3rd or 4th level and you require the kids to wear the mask, you are already too late. In my opinion.
I don't anticipate us starting at level 1 or 2, because this is something that we do need to test out, and we do need to, and in level 3, masks are required for grades 7 through 12. And I do think a lot of our K-6 teachers will probably require masks as well for safety reasons. So I think you will see more masks.
So the teachers are going to be able to require masks if they want?
Yes, that's at all of the levels.
At all of them?
That's at all of the
Except
levels.
for level 1.
Yes, level 1, there are no restrictions. But at all of the other levels, the teachers can request masks.
You're almost there. All we need them is in the hallway and in the building.
But I think the buses will,
Yeah, I think.
They're highly recommended.
I saw that, but they're not required. They're not required.
Dr. Carlin, and then so you may know, was there also, unless I read it somewhere else, reports there on the different, schools, like middle school versus intermediate, where they were gonna require masks?
yeah, the intermediate, there was kind of a draft of the work that the intermediate group has done, and the pre-K, early childhood group, I think, was in there.
So that's something we can go back to. Okay.
Yes, and you'll see, this week, you'll see 4 or 5 more of those, and then 2 weeks from now, you'll see everything all kind of brought together, and that's where we'll ask you to kind of approve it.
And she kind of answered one of my other questions I had, because I didn't know if this was the appropriate time to ask that or not, but where we're thinking we feel like we're gonna start out as a district with school starts, and I know that's a hard question to answer right now because we don't know where our numbers are, but I'm hoping that we're at least considering maybe being at level 2 if the numbers are showing positive things, you know, and people aren't sick, versus jumping right into level 3 or 4.
And again, that will be a joint decision with us and the health department in looking at that. And Dr. Hannigan, I appreciate your comments, and that's why we're not, you know, we have a great health services coordinator, we have some great school nurses, that have also been part of this, but we are working very closely with Dr. Burns and the director of the health department, because they have that medical perspective of, you know, what is the right balance here, and what is the current evidence research out there saying about what the most effective approaches will be to this. And I will tell you, you know, certainty is something that I think everybody wants. Our staff wants it, we want it, our students want it, our parents certainly want it. The certainty, I think, is knowing that we have a plan that we're gonna follow. Nobody knows what the world is gonna be like in 6 months. But the fact that we have a framework established. Now, I will tell you, as we work through this, even that may have to be adjusted. You know, we may learn that, there's a much better strategy or a better way to go about this. But in looking at what others are doing, I think having a progressive approach that coordinates tightly with the medical community is what gives us the best opportunity. And I look at wearing a mask as, again, it's an inconvenience. It's not comfortable, but it increases the chances we're gonna have more pretty normal days of school. It increases the chances that we're not gonna see all of our businesses being shut down again for an extended period of time because this thing gets out of control. Washing hands, you know, changing my behavior a little bit on how many large group gatherings I go to, those kind of things are all things that, that to some extent, we can influence those, and we're improving our chances to have more of a normal year. The flip side of that is, we also have contingencies built in here that if things can't stay normal, how we will go about getting more restrictive and how we will continue to deliver those educational services to kids. Hope that helps.
Dana has had a question for a while.
So what are we defining as a large group? I just mean, do we have a number?
Oh, no,
Okay.
we don't have a number.
And then what will be the average size of the classroom
When we are at level 5,
at any level?
so at our earlier levels, they are the normal classroom.
Okay, which is on average, like, what would you say? 20?
20 to 25.
Yeah.
And then as we move up,
Then that would be 10 to 12.
okay,
We actually went to some of our schools and took the measuring tape and figured out how many steps we could actually get in the room. And social distance.
On the accountability piece of this, are we gonna need to redraft some truancy policies with the hybrid and the remote learning?
Possibly, and that's part of what we're working with the state on how tightly this is gonna integrate with tracking attendance. So we are looking at, how we'll code things and even kind of what our attendance categories are. You know, because the interesting concept here is if a student, or even for that matter, if a staff member is quarantined, but they're not home and and so ill they're unable to work or to attend, if we have a remote option that they can transition into fairly seamlessly, they could get credit for attending. Staff member could teach remotely, and all could go on just like they were there. Wouldn't be as ideal as having them there, but in terms of, would that create a truancy issue? Only if we chose to treat it differently. So, yes, we're looking at that, whether we'll need to make some policy adjustments, but our hope is they shouldn't be too drastic if we have to.
We actually have a subcommittee now that is working on, an assurances document that parents will sign if they opt to go full-time remote, that says, you know, I have to do the assignments, I have to spend so much time in seat based on what KJ's guidance has been, for counting the students. And then what happens if you don't participate, you know, then we have the option of moving you back into on-site education.
And I've been sitting in on the committee, can't remember what it's called, but doing all this planning, and there's really been good discussions, and you guys are doing a great job on letting everyone speak and trying to look at all sides of it. And I don't know if this is the right time to say that, but I feel like we're in the middle of your presentation, but I just wanted to point that out. And, we're gonna have questions through the school year, so.
Well, and I know you've been on that committee, and he's mentioned all of the people that have served on various committees, and I will tell you, in the development of even this document, we started out with trying to match up CDC, and they had a mild and a moderate and a, oh my gosh, exposure kind of thing. They had 3 levels, and based on some of the feedback from our committees and some parents, they said, can we make that more gradual with some more gradual changes? So we ended up going from 3 to 6 because of feedback from our stakeholders.
Before Glenda kind of takes us through the remainder of the levels here, since Jennifer brought that up, the select group has looked at this kind of in concept. Tomorrow, they're going to take a deeper dive into it to look at some of the details. So we are vetting this with a number of groups. Mr. Perea doesn't know this yet, but he was on my list to call, and we'll be asking the GCA leadership to sit down with us and go over this. We're sharing it with you guys tonight. We've got a parent focus group planned for Thursday night to pull a couple of parents from each building and run this by them and give them an opportunity to give some feedback. Our administrators are looking at it. We looked at it again with the health department last week, and we got to follow up with it. So there's a lot of eyes that are going to be on this over the next week. Our goal is by Friday to have this in a good enough format that we can share it with all of our detail-oriented teams to say, now, this is pretty close to final, so build this in, tie this tightly into what your plan is, knowing that this is, you know, kind of the parameters that we'll be planning on operating under. So there's a lot that's going to happen with it pretty quick, and getting it out in front of a lot of people. So I don't want to.
Do you have another question?
I do, thank you. This may be covered down the road or maybe somewhere in here. It's just a lot of material, so if it's not something that I can answer right now, that's fine. But with the remote learning, so I obviously have noticed that we've had a lot of teachers either transferring or hiring for the remote learning. So are we doing, what does that mean? And I'm sure it means different things at different levels, but are we going with a program that's already established, like a virtual type program, if you're going to go full-time remote learning? Or are we expecting all of our teachers to provide some sort of remote learning option?
Perfect question. So grades 7 through 12, for those students that want to do remote, they will use Edgenuity. That is the same program that our virtual school uses, and it is available for middle school and up. So we're already using it, we're just going to expand how we use it. So for grades K through 6, we have hired those teachers. We are using all of our own curriculum. So the majority, actually, I do think all of it, I think I can say all fairly comfortably. All of our curriculum has options for online learning. So we're going to take our own curriculum, and those teachers that have been hired are developing those lessons and creating videos, and then we're going to bank those videos. So if KJ is teaching in a classroom and half of her kids are gone, but she doesn't feel comfortable flipping her own classroom, for example, or have the time, then she can call me, and I'm a virtual teacher or remote learning teacher, and I already banked the lessons that she's getting ready to teach. So she can put that in Shobi or Google Classroom or whatever, platform she's using, and she can put out my lesson that's already been made. So we will have a bank as well as the classroom.
So follow-up question, sorry. So with the 7 to 12 using Ingenuity, is that just if you do full-time remote? It's not if you do the blended?
No, it's also if you do the blended.
Okay, and then on that, do they have access to all the, the elective classes?
The majority of them. They don't have all of the career tech at the high school, but they have other electives that they can take, and they have some that we don't have. So, and they do have a strong component for social emotional that is available at all levels. So we even have that available at the elementary level that we can use if we want to, in addition to the new curriculum that we just taught.
Thank you.
Any other questions on the?
I should just say, as someone who tried to put together a written plan like this for my little mom and pop show, the fact that you could actually do this for the school district, despite my criticisms, is pretty amazing.
A lot of
and I want
teamwork.
to applaud all the people that put all the time, and you're going to get so much love, Becca, if you haven't already, including from me. So, I got to hand it to you for that too, because I've been taking it daily from my parents and stuff coming to my office and my staff. And I am anxious to hear what you have to plan for staff members, whether it be, what they're going to do if they've been exposed.
Yeah, he's just
Okay.
going to talk about that here in
Okay,
just a little bit.
Next question.
Yeah.
And
There
we go.
All right, good segue. So on the operational side is when we get into issues like that. So these are the committee members. KJ and I were co-chairs of the operations group. Again, essentially department heads, Charlie, Transportation, Roxy Technology, Tracy Johnson, Food Services, John Geis, Facilities, Michelle Shull, and Health Services. And then we asked one principal from each level to be on that committee too. Again, as we looked at that flow chart, they're also in charge of the subcommittee groups, the very lowest group, boots on the ground. So they're doing a lot of the work that Glenda's describing for their own departments. And that gets vetted back out to this operations group here, because there may be things that they're planning. Food services, as an example, one of the strategies may be in a classroom, or in a building rather, that we're going to provide lunch in the classrooms now, not in the cafeteria setting, okay? So as she's going through and working with building principals to do that, there could be some consequences that she hasn't thought of that was going to impact John Geis with facilities. We need more sanitizer, we need more trash cans available, those kinds of things. So as it comes back up through that committee, then we get to see the process as well and say, have you thought about what are we going to do for trash cans, what are we going to do for sanitation, all those things. So that's kind of how our group has worked. So each one of those groups then will take and develop a plan. You saw a draft version of transportation, and I believe health services this time went out for you. So they basically think of Glenda's levels and how is it going to impact my department and change based on those levels. Some may not change at all based on levels 1, 2, 3, and only when you get to the upper levels, they're going to have an impact. So this is not the exclusive list, but these are just some examples to show the board and the public about what kinds of things are they wrestling with, are they asking questions about, and are they considering during this time? So transportation to start with, we had the good fortune, and I think this was published to the board a while back, but we have several people in our district that got to sit on the state level committee early on in the process. Before we started in June, they were actually doing legwork. Dr. Crummon was a part of some of that committee work at the state level. Charlie Stillingham was also a part of that, so he got firsthand information, what the state was thinking, how that's going to impact us locally. Again, seats on the bus, social distancing. At one point, their plan was like 7 or 8 kids on the bus, is what they were talking about. So you can imagine how that sent him into a panic with the number of kids. We transport about 3,300 kids. So he had kind of firsthand information as he was going through and developing. But other things, you know, just simple logistics. How many kids can you put on the bus? Assigned seating, that's kind of coming from our local health department too, and helping us track kids if we do have an infection, as well as maybe arranging transportation by family. So social distancing with all the same families together in a section on the bus, we don't have to spread them out. So we can get more kids on the bus based on that circumstance, okay? So things like that. Personal protective equipment for our drivers, what does that look like? And then sanitizing, both on the short term, in between routes perhaps, so you have a morning, a midday, and an afternoon, so what does that look like? And then deep cleaning where they're using special equipment, ionization machines, and they're doing different things at that point. So those are all the kinds of things, well, not all, but those are some examples of the things that Charlie's thinking about in terms of transportation. Technology. Technology, as you can imagine, in this planning process is excessive. I think one of the first meetings, so this operations group, we meet 3 times a week. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 1:30 to 2:30, we meet and go through this process. In addition to their subcommittee work they've been developing at those lower levels. I think the first update that I had from Roxy, she had 150 questions that they were just jotting down, brainstorming. What are we going to do with this? What are we going to do with that? So you can imagine that that's excessive in the technology department. So communication, standardized or up to individual buildings. So this is communication with your staff. As we move from an on-site learning to a remote learning, and maybe you have students that are, again, with higher absenteeism, so they're going to be out for a couple of days. So how do you communicate with those students after they're not in face-to-face? A lot of our schools have chosen to use different platforms, and some of the feedback that we got from parents was it was too much. I have 3 kids, 3 different buildings, they're using 3 different platforms, and I have to figure out how to use each one of those. So the technology group is talking about that in and of itself. Does it make sense to give the buildings their opportunity to create where teachers are comfortable with that, parents are generally comfortable with that, or does it make more sense that we as a district are just going to pick something and move forward? Connectivity, we learned that we have roughly 10% of our population that doesn't have connectivity. So problem solving that. They've taken some steps to create some more site areas where they can go to a school parking lot as an example to get connectivity. KJ and the district also supported many of our families over the last 9 weeks by providing them individual connectivity. So this group, again, how do you deal with 10% of your kids not having connectivity and a chance that we're going to have a remote learning process? Devices, number of devices, how do you distribute those devices, protection for those devices, all of those things are on their agenda. Again, if they're using individual devices, either on an on-site learning or remote learning, is there sanitizing that needs to be taking place? That requires special cleaning equipment. And then lastly, just again, as an example of attendance, and we mentioned that a little bit earlier, and they're creating different codes and things that we can look for to track attendance and record that accountability.
Steve, I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
On technology. Are we looking at the courses that we're offering that require a technology that students may not have access to if they have to work from home? I know my daughter had a class where they couldn't do much because they didn't have the right type of device to use for that class. And so I'm just wondering if that is going to play a role in the curriculum that we continue to offer.
I'm sure that's probably something through instruction, like lessons learned, you know, that we went through over the last 9 weeks. Because again, part of the difference between what we're dealing with now and what we did over the last 9 weeks was they had a week essentially to put together their plan.
Yeah.
We had some direction from the state in terms of less is more, not introducing new curriculum, but that's got to be different now. So some of those things may be addressed through that instructional model is, we know last 9 weeks the student couldn't do that, so what do we do now? And so I'm sure that's part of the planning process that Glenda and her group's been going through.
But as we know, like right now, we haven't taken away classes at this point or modified, okay. Thanks.
Food services, Tracy, maybe had the good fortune that, her department was one of the departments that really, went through carrying out basically the functions of their department through the last 9 weeks. We were still serving meals to kids, even though we weren't in our facilities. And so, again, she had a lot of things to glean from that process. What went well? What do we do differently? So these are some of the kinds of things that they wrestle with. Logistics, breakfast, and lunch. So again, we didn't have to deal with this because our kids weren't in the building. So now all the issues of social distancing or physical distancing comes into play. Process at the beginning of the day, we used to at the elementary school send kids to the breakfast line, they went into the gymnasium. That's not going to be available to be able to do those kinds of things. So what does that mean? Point of sales is another one. We have to be able to, for funding purposes, track who's eating lunch, if they're on pre-reduced lunch. So she's got to figure out that system. Even if they're in the classroom or you're still funneling through the cafeterias. Menu selection, so they have created a menu at this point that's going to be rotational. So 2 weeks, kind of a classroom-friendly menu, and they'll go through that process and they'll just redo that every 2 weeks until maybe something's changed. But with that becomes food distribution. We don't have the salad bars, free choice. We won't be able to do that in the future. So individually wrapped products, silverware, PPE for their own staff when they're going through the line, through the process. And then maybe one of those things that she learned from last time is what happens if we have exposure within that team, the people who are preparing the food for our kids, and that would potentially shut down that kitchen, but we still have school there. So the kitchen might be shut down, but we still have tons of kids on site. Now what? And so they're having to, again, think through, plan through those processes. So personnel, Dr. Hannigan asked a little bit about personnel. So I tell you, this has been something that's just, it's a monster in terms of what to do with leave. So personnel group has been talking about really kind of two main issues: at-risk, high-risk employees, what to do with them. So we've developed a process right now to identify those people. Again, CDC guidelines helps provide that. What's the process for accommodation? Reasonable accommodations can be lots of things. Could be additional PPE, so mask, gown, shield. That could be considered accommodation. Maybe it's different work hours or a different work location. So all that will kind of be handled on an individual basis, but we will have a process to go through. And the same will be true with leave for staff members as you have people that are going to become exposed. Maybe they're ordered by local health departments to self-quarantine. So what does that mean for me if I have to do that and I got to be out for 14 days? Do I have to use my own leave? How does COVID-related leave or the FFCRA leave kick in? So we'll be outlining that for a process for our folks that we'll be able to share with both them and with supervisors. Health department, many of our groups that we talked about with the operational really are intertwined. So Roxy is an example. She serves on operation groups, but she's also been on the instructional side because many of the decisions they're making will impact technology. Health services is certainly one of those. So all the way through, whether that be the levels that Glenda's talked to you about, or whether that's with the things that I'm dealing with, the personnel and leave, health services has really been intertwined in all that together in terms of planning. So they are a direct line of communications with the health department. We've been talking about screening processes for kids and employees, what that might look like. When we originally started out, that would be a screening process where you go through before you enter the room or enter the building or any of those. Well, that's not practical. So talking about, do first hour teachers do a screening process with their kids? Do we track that information on an app, as an example, that gets submitted back to the health department? Isolation rooms is a recommendation through CDC and KDHE. What do you do when you have a potential infected or symptomatic student or staff member? They will also be providing videos with information for our kids, so kid-appropriate information about what is COVID. Trying to set aside some of those fears for our students. What happens if you have symptoms? How do you take steps to prevent that? Good hygiene. So Michelle and all the nurses that have been participating in creating those things.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
I don't know if it falls under this, but, the, social emotional support side of it on that, are you adding counselors in that things, or do you feel like that's something we're gonna have to focus on more, or is it something you're gonna talk about later?
You want to talk about their social emotional?
Well, we do have a brand new social emotional curriculum that is being embedded in all of the classrooms, so from the very beginning, it's not a separate full-out class that the counselors do, so that is kicking off right at the beginning of the school year, and that's K-12. Okay, thank you.
So another piece will be kind of that accountability, checking in on kids when they're doing something remotely. That'll also be built into that part. Facilities, again, dealing with utilization of staff. So one thing that this group's been talking about, so typically you have a day crew and a night crew. Is it more important for us to maybe have more of a presence during the day with more people in the building? So John's been thinking about how to utilize his staff maybe in a different way. What personal protective equipment does his group need, individually, the custodian crew, grounds crew, those kinds of things. But also dealing with it from the building's perspective, is there maybe things like sneeze guards and plexiglass, those kinds of things that need to be installed, so they've been working on those. Do we have enough resources, hand sanitizer, disinfectant wipes? If you tried to purchase those yourself, that could be difficult, so that's true on a massive level also. So stockpiling a little bit of that, and then any additional cleaning equipment. Again, I talked about the machine where they can kind of go in and fog over a room, and so those are super expensive, and we don't have a lot available. So scheduling those to get those around to different buildings to use at different times is certainly something that needs to be planned for. Questions on the operations piece?
So there will come a point when we'll see specific policy related to how you're going to handle a lot of these different situations. Right now, you're just touching base.
Yeah.
You're working on a lot of these things.
Yes, sir. So like the pieces that you got in place Friday, you'll get more of those as we go forward up until the time that it's the final plan or draft.
The other thing you'll see is, we're hoping at the next meeting, normally in July, we bring you the classified handbook. That's kind of our, contract's not the right word, but our guiding policies for our classified employees. So you'll see a pretty traditional classified handbook, but then there will be a, what do we call it, like a COVID addendum supplement, COVID supplement. Hopefully, it may come next time, it may be the following meeting. But it will have some of the things for our classified employees, like related to high risk, related to leave, that maybe we're gonna have to look at a little differently because of the COVID situation. And we'll ask you to approve those as a separate supplement, which will then give that the power of policy. With our teachers group, tonight, your next item will be to discuss a memorandum of understanding that deals with a couple of issues in their contract. Once we have our approach on our classified people, we plan to sit down with the teachers group, and some of the same things may apply to our teachers contract. It may just be a matter of interpretation, and we can sit down with the GCA leadership and agree that, hey, this is how we'll implement the use of emergency leave related to COVID, and we can make sure that we can live with that. But we may get to a point where we say, that's not allowed under the contract, and so we have to change the contract and we may have to end up doing another one of these memorandums of understanding. The one you're gonna be looking at tonight was pretty time sensitive. We wanted to get some information out to our parents about changes in the calendar that it would create. So because we don't probably want to be doing 10 of these memorandums of understanding, I'm guessing Gil doesn't want to do that. So we're hoping that we can kind of hold off, and if there, as we get close to the start of school, if there's other things that have to be addressed, we can lump those into one and deal with those as one. We don't have that requirement with our classified employees. The board has the authority for our classified employees and our administrative employees to be able to set that policy, and it's not negotiable, basically. So that's kind of, so your question, will you see this in a policy? It will come either probably through this supplement to the classified or administrator handbook, or through these memorandums of understanding with our negotiator.
So I have 11 employees and 2,500 patients. And I anticipated when I started that my biggest difficulty was going to be the 2,500 patients and separating kids from their parents when they came, all the things we put kids through to try to keep everybody safe. And I got practically zero pushback from the parents. And yet today, I'm dealing with another issue on the 11 employees. And it's been the employees that have caused most uncertainty. I've had so many different scenarios with those 11 employees. And I'm just mentally trying to extrapolate that to your situation.
Times 1,350.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, see, that's in
Right.
It's great for a reason, Dr. Hannigan.
Yeah.
You're exactly right. And so, I guess I'll flash back to the very first slide of this. Our priority is our safety of our students and our staff and student learning. And we're trying our best to reassure people that we are taking steps to keep them safe as well as our students. And, there'll be consequences of this that are, as an example, if you're ordered by the local health department to stay home, what does that look like for you? And we're going to try to make that in the simplest form possible, step-by-step directions of what that means. And so we're trying to put those kinds of things. But you're right. Putting, every scenario on paper is going to be too difficult. So we're having discussions with this as this plan gets moved forward, what that leaves. And really, there's, I think, two big pockets: at-risk, high-risk people, and then what does just general leave provisions look like? That's kind of been our focus at this point.
Our struggle has been that healthcare to healthcare office, the employees would get different advice from a healthcare provider related to the need for testing or non-testing. And even the advice that they would get from the health department about whether they should isolate, how long they should isolate, what kind of testing they can get symptomatic testing, can they get asymptomatic testing. That's actually constantly changing, and it's different from healthcare provider to healthcare provider, which is causing a lot of troubles for me, because really the reflexive response anytime one of my employees asks anybody is quarantine. Can I get some antibiotics can I do a telemed for a sinus infection? We need to quarantine. And that's pretty much the response. And it came down to practicality versus the desire to be safe.
Right.
But you have to have some staff to try to run things. And when you have health care providers just reflexively saying quarantine, it puts you in a position as a non-health care provider to say, well, you should or shouldn't do that.
Yeah.
What we have to do is just go with the staff and say, whatever you decide you want to do, quarantine or not quarantine, but here's how the conversation goes.
Yeah, and that's what we're trying to outline, but also like Linda put in her slide, that it may get to the point where we have some staffing issues, and so what does that impact on our instructional model then at that point? And again, I mean, if I can just reiterate to our staff that's kind of watching or hear this, it's, you know, we want you here, we want you to do what you love to do, working with kids, and we're gonna do everything we can to protect you, but, you know, while you're here, so.
So, are you gonna?
Yeah.
So my question is, I don't know, question, comment, but, you know, we're really at the liability of risk on a day-to-day basis as far as the teacher and the student who's possibly gonna affect who. So how do we mitigate, not necessarily our responsibility, but the responsibility on each party and with the communication aspect of it? And then the other question, another question I have is, if that student has some symptoms, no matter, depending on the grade level, obviously, but, and you say you have to go home depending on the level, does that student now have to learn remote to keep going, or is he sick?
Yeah. So that has been an issue that we're anticipating. We're anticipating our absenteeism with both our students and our staff going up. So I'll give an example that I've used in several cases. So I have hay fever, I have since I was a little kid. So every, you know, 1st of August till probably the middle of October during harvest, I'm gonna have hay fever issues, right? So sneezing, runny nose, eyes, the whole business. Well, normally in years past, I would go to work because I'm not contagious, I just have hay fever. So I would go to work. Well, now we're gonna be asking employees not to come to work because you're symptomatic. So, you know, really educating our parents on self-screening, screening your students, when to keep them home, doing those kinds of things. That's why we've spent so much time into creating opportunities that when these kids are absent, whether that be for the sniffles or they've been ordered to quarantine, they're gonna have an opportunity to continue to get a high level of education. And so that's why we're stressing that.
So is every student or parent and staff gonna be able to sign a hold harmless letter?
We're looking into that with legal counsel, whether or not that is necessary or, would benefit the, you know, what kind of liability releases would be appropriate.
Okay, and then also the communication piece with Dr. Burns, if she has something that comes up and it's very important, how fast can we get that out to the rest of the staff in a timely fashion, I'm sure, to make a determination in the middle of school? Then how do we react to that?
Yeah,
Right.
so,
Go ahead. I think we have a really good relationship with the health department. I think that would happen quickly. The other thing is, you know, we changed our health services coordinator back to a full-time position earlier this summer. We added an additional nurse for the district. We may end up kind of supplementing with some substitute nurses even to have, depending on what happens, to have more nursing staff on site. One of the things that happened during the spring, when we all saw our schools without kids, our nurses, about half of our nurses volunteered to work closely with the county health department in their testing center. So we have some nurses that had some really good experience in that, in understanding what was going on with symptoms, how those things were being handled. So as we have kids who are symptomatic, our nurses will be one of those first lines of defense at the building. Should that kid go home? Is it just hay fever and we don't need to worry about it? So having, you know, we're fortunate in our district. We've made the choice to have registered nurses. A lot of districts use LPNs. So we have a little higher skill level with our nurses in order to be able to help with some of those determinations. But again, I think all that hopefully will lead to, I mean, we're going to be going along here and we're going to coordinate with the health department and we're going to have to make some educated estimates, best guesses on what's the right step to take, but we'll follow the protocols that the health department gives us. And Michelle, sorry, I just lost Michelle's name. Michelle has been working, and I think she's on her third or fourth revision, I think, of her plan. Because this stuff is changing. It's changing based on what's happening in other places. It's changing based on the guidance that our folks are getting. But I will tell you from my conversations with Dr. Burns and Colleen Breeze, they are, they're taking this seriously, but they're also trying to take a reasonable approach and understand the implications that this is gonna have when we quarantine a classroom or if we close a school. And so I do feel good, because it's way out of the expertise level that we have. We do not have that expertise.
And their willingness and availability to us has been unbelievable. So we need to ask questions, or oftentimes Michelle, but even as a leadership team, they'll come and meet with us or Zoom in with us, and they've been really great.
Do we have resources that we're looking at getting PPE from to be able to provide for students and staff?
Yeah, so we're in the process. So KJ was very proactive in that early on, just knowing that this is coming, and then, it's going to be harder and harder to get. So she started stockpiling, if you will, things, just big ticket items. We also had extremely enormous amount of support from our community. People donating masks through Michelle Scholl in our health department. That's been outstanding. So we have been able to stockpile a few things. We're building processes that buildings can access that based on their needs. So we, again, just figuring out how to get it ordered so we can kind of stay ahead of it, so they're not trying to react and try to pick up things on their own, that we have a centralized location to be able to do that.
I was going to say they have the Southwest Kansas COVID resources group that's been doing a lot of things, and you may have been already working with them anyway, but they've been working on getting masks, gowns, shields. They've been doing it all summer long, or all this time that the pandemic has been going on, and they just volunteered to do it. So they might be a really good resource to be able to reach out to be able to do that. It's Shannon Dick that's been running that.
Thank you. Other questions for operations? Okay, so communication plan, this is kind of what we're thinking for our next steps. So the board got a draft, if you will, update tonight, just in terms of where we're at in our process. So Dr. Carlin mentioned that we're going to be finalizing that as we move forward, but the final plan will come to the board at our next meeting, which is July 27th. So you're going to have a lot of information. We're going to give it to you in segments along the way, but that evening you'll have a completed document, and it's going to be big. So we don't necessarily want to ask you to vote on that information that evening, because there'll be so much. So we were thinking about doing a special board of education meeting, maybe the 29th or 30th. Leaving that up to you. Number one, if you feel like it's necessary to do that, or secondly, which day would be better.
The other thing I might throw in here is, so, first, thanks for being here tonight. This is our first meeting back in the same room, since we started with this, our first regular meeting. And so, looking at our seating here, we took the table away from our media folks to try to create enough space in case we had people come. We're anticipating there may be a higher level of public interest at that meeting on the 27th. So we're probably going to look at an alternate location where we could have more people. Tonight, the meeting is also available on the screen out in the lobby if we had more people. But just in case we have more people that want to be here in person or would want to address the board, we want to have that option. But we also didn't want to, because this is going to be a big decision, we didn't just necessarily want to tell you, here it is, you got it Friday or Wednesday, and now we need a decision first thing Monday night before the public's even really heard about it. So if the board thinks that would be appropriate to have a couple of days or 3 days, we can't wait 2 more weeks is kind of our thing, because there's a lot that's going to have to happen. So really, our preference would be maybe no later than Thursday to be able to get rolling on it. So, because there will be a lot of things that happen, training with administrators, training with teachers, communication to families, that we won't start communicating those details until we have an approved plan. So that's kind of an
Dana.
ask.
But all of these things are gonna be presented to us as they come, right? Like, we're not gonna just be given one big packet on the 27th. Hopefully you'll be like, right, didn't you mention that earlier, that as you
You'll
have,
probably get them in your reading, you'll get drafts of them as they're getting close to final in your reading, but this will be the next board meeting.
Yeah.
okay,
Is when this is gonna come in its big finished form for you. So,
but you're thinking we'll get drafts, that kind of gives us a heads up
Yeah.
of some,
yep, so you'll see where they're going, but you really won't have the opportunity to, and if you see concerns, please let me know if you have questions or things, but as a board, you won't have an opportunity to really, weigh in on it until the next meeting.
That answer it?
yeah. It makes me a little uncomfortable, I have to say.
Say that again?
It makes me a little uncomfortable, because that's like a 2 or 3 day time, if that's when we're really gonna get the specifics. And at that point, I mean, none of the concerns that we have would necessarily be able to be addressed in a short amount of time.
Well, they can be tweaked, and
Oh, yeah.
again, while we're also giving it to you a little in advance. So, I mean, you had transportation, health department, so you've had that's the direction they're heading and they're planning. If that's not, then please reach out to Dr. Carlin, because we need to tweak that along the way. So you'll get those as we go, but as Dr. Carlin was saying, if we wait and we move that back till August, we're in school. We don't have time to train or implement any of those things, because the board hasn't taken action on it.
I understand that, I'm just a little nervous that it won't, the draft, I think is what you call them, they won't be specific enough until the very end, right? Is that what you're
You're
communicating?
like transportation, you're seeing probably pretty close to their final.
Okay,
Charlie was on the state committee, so he's pretty familiar with it. But these others are gonna be looking at the state committee guidance this week and maybe making a few adjustments, but it's not gonna be like starting over.
Yeah,
You
and
know,
I would say that that's true with our health plan that you saw too. It's pretty done, knowing that she's done 4 or 5 revisions on it, and that may happen again, in the next week or so based on information we gather, but that's her plan right now. So,
and I get it too, I mean, it's just a discomfort, I think overall, is that everything's constantly changing.
Sure.
Unknowns, and
yeah, and it's
so
coming fast.
it's not necessarily, please don't think that I'm thinking your process, it's just
so it's hard.
all of it, right?
Yeah, absolutely, we get it.
Yeah, it's very hard because on the construction front, it's a different way we have to handle things, but so many employees and students. So on July 27th, you'll have a final okey-dokey, thumbs up, thumbs down from the county health department.
Yeah, so, we'll be vetting that with them as we go forward this week even, and then just continue to have those conversations moving forward. So as the plan gets finalized, again, if that were to happen to change our levels, or we're gonna be starting, we'll be talking with them.
We anticipate you guys would get the plan in writing that Friday, and then the meeting on 27th. And then we would have a few days, if there were things that came up at that meeting that the board had concerns about, or in the interim, we would have that time to be able to address that, which isn't a whole lot of time, but there's a lot getting done in a day or two now.
Yeah.
The July 29th to 30th will have to be Zoom, because I'll be out of town work, so if I can request a Zoom, that's great, to Zoom in.
Okay?
I was gonna add also, for Dana, that the school teams are meeting, and then they bring their plan to the Office of Instruction team. And then after that, it goes to the Division Select team. So there's been essentially 3 committees that have seen it before we send it to Dr. Carlin to send out to you. So they're also pretty close.
And that's very similar to what we're doing in operations. So again, that kind of vertical alignment, so having boots on the ground comes to the operations group. If we don't have complications, it creates something for a different committee or department, then it gets presented to the select vision group as well, which is about 30 stakeholders total. Yes, ma'am?
We've had the transportation and those presented tonight, so I feel like those are out in the public if people watch that information. As we get those other groups and reports, and I have people ask me, what information can I go ahead and share? What's the difference? Because those won't be shared like this before in a board meeting.
Yeah, so again, I just would reiterate, these are just drafts. These are
Right.
just starting in the direction. Nothing becomes public and official until the board takes action on it. So we're not necessarily publicizing this either. We're just giving the board an update that we're headed in this direction.
But, so then, I guess I'm not sure if parents approach me about other committees that we haven't presented on yet specifically.
So I would suggest that you can tell them certainly that the direction the district's going is along these lines. But it's still draft, it's not approved by the board. And if they have very specific questions, they can reach out to me, they can reach in, and I can get them to, you know, if somebody's got questions about what is transportation gonna look like, I'll get them to Charlie, because Charlie's the one that, you know, and then the answer will be, as long as this plan is approved, this is what we intend to do.
Because there's just a difference in how we're receiving that information. This will be received at an open meeting, but some of it will receive through email
Sure.
before the meeting. But I
Yep.
just wanted to make sure I
Yep, absolutely.
shared the information I could, but not go against what you were expecting.
Right.
So, Heath, I found myself in a position today asking you, questions about the recommendation or the thoughts of the health department, which kind of puts you guys in a spot, because if I ask, what are the health department's thoughts on something, you have to have had that conversation and know that. Is there any possibility that we can get a representative of the health department to come on the 27th, which we have those kind of questions? I don't have to put you on the spot and ask questions.
And
What
check
their
with
thoughts are.
Dr. Burns, Pauline.
I just, I would just feel better every now and then ask you,
Okay.
what's your recommendation in this situation? And then I can feel like I've asked the person the most suited to answer that question.
So I think Dr. Burns has been self-isolating, so we'll probably need to have Zoom or phone available for
Yes,
her.
it is.
I mean, I know Colleen's gone to the county commission meetings in person, but Dr. Burns has not.
Yeah, all the meetings they've participated in with us have been, which has been great, because it's been convenient, and we get their expertise, but, so. But we-
Okay, so maybe just jumping back to this, so picking the night for the special meeting, maybe it's our next step, and then, again, once the board takes action, on the plan at that special meeting, then we would spend from late July through the 7th of August just doing a communication blitz. So we've been sending out some communication currently in very general form. This is what it's gonna look like. We are gonna have school, those kinds of things, but we'll get more specific again once, kind of goes back to Jennifer's question, once the plan's approved, then we can start putting out a lot more information, and again, really short time frame. As you'll see later, with the proposal that we're gonna do next is, that's kind of the last week before we can get into having people back. So that would incorporate, parents, really explaining the levels that Glenda went over, enrollment options. We do have some people that have already enrolled. We're still in the process of collecting enrollment, but they would have the option to make a different decision, if they wanted to in terms of choice. Obviously, we have to update our staff. We have scheduled, at this point, our administrative retreat to give our principals kind of a look at that as well. New teachers come back on the 6th of August, and then everybody reports back, 10 through the 14th. So that's kind of what we're thinking in terms of our communication. You want to get more specific on the date yet?
Will the 30th
The 30th
not
is
work?
better for me.
Okay.
Like,
Is there anybody that the 30th would not work for?
What time?
We can do it whenever, if you keep it consistent with normal meetings, 6.
Being a
Sorry,
consensus.
I can participate with you via Zoom.
I'm just gonna have to do Zoom. Mark, are you still on?
Yes, I am.
What is, does the 30th look okay for you?
It does.
All right. Glenda, take note of that mask, will
I
you?
was gonna say, can we get another mask before the next board meeting?
Good sympathy, sympathy.
So let's go with July 30th at 6 o'clock and the place to be determined.
Yes. Okay.
You can say it.
How you good?
All right. So So Keith mentioned, putting this all together in one document, so we have started looking at what that might look like, and just so that you have an idea, we're looking at the table of contents right now. So as those plans come together, we're going to form a handbook, and I'm really trying to come up with a clever name. So far, I haven't come up with anything, but, I think this needs some kind of catchy title to it, so, but all of the different operational levels, you saw the classroom levels, we'll have one for school offices and district offices, similar to what we used, during the last 9 weeks of school, where we moved our offices to different levels. We'll add those in there, all the school plans will be in there, and then the operational plans that you've mentioned will be in there as well. So, along with, explanation and narrative as needed. So. Any last final questions?
Thank you. Thanks, Steve.
Again, I just kind of reiterate, as you're looking at some of the details, if there's things you have questions on or thoughts about, you want to kind of let me know what you're thinking. Sooner the better, kind of stuff probably. That would be helpful. But I will also compliment the work that's being done by Ethan, KJ, and Glenda, but also with all of those groups. It's really pretty phenomenal, and there's never a day that goes by something doesn't come up that we haven't thought of yet. But we are, I think we're finally at the point that we probably have more answers than we have questions. For a long time, we had a lot more questions than we had answers, and as we get closer to our deadline of having this ready for you, we are, I think we've crested the hill, and we're getting there, so.
Well, thank you all, and thank you, Jen, for going to this meeting. Appreciate it.
And Mark attends too.
And I said, and Mark. Okay. So new business, revised 2021 school calendars.
Chief. Oh, you're right.
While you're doing that, Steve, I'm not hearing anything about.
Yeah, we do. We've got people working on that too, and that, there will be a component. Matter of fact, I just texted Glenda that we need to add extracurricular activities to our table of contents.
What's nice is right now, we have seen the draft document from the state, so we can start matching other things, what they're recommending, and kind of aligning with it.
Is that from the state health department or from the state board of education?
State Board of Education, KSC. And it is over 1,000 pages.
Yours won't be that long, so don't.
So you might want to give us a few more days if you're going to give us that.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Okay. Okay, so you can see my mask face for a little bit longer. So I'm going to talk a little bit about something that was introduced a little earlier in the meeting, a memorandum of understanding. So before I get to the actual memorandum, I'll give you a little background, which you've heard tonight. So probably for a month and a half, we've had a lot of people involved in this planning process. So you can be peeking up here. This is the calendar that the board approved previously. So through this process, and again, just really examining what's happening on a daily basis with school and making those decisions, how you get kids to school with buses, line them up at the door, what does breakfast look like. There's a potential that we're going to have lots and lots of change just in daily operations of our school system. So some of the feedback we've been getting from all of the participants in this planning process is how in the world are we going to educate our staff on, again, routines. I may have been in a building for 20 years, pretty established in terms of every year is going to look basically the same. We're going to come back, we're going to have in-service, we're going to have an open house, we're going to meet with parents, I'm going to have my classroom ready. All that's going to look the same. Well, that may not be true this year. So that feedback from those teacher groups has been, do we have enough time? How are we going to educate our families? How are we going to educate our staff in terms of some of those changes? So this is the calendar that the board approved. So in the contract language, we have allocated 6 days of professional development that we can utilize. So our first day of professional development in the current calendar is on the 6th of August. Then we have a work day on the 7th, and we have some in-services spread out throughout the year. So now fast forward with what you've heard tonight, your anxiety going up with the amount of change and planning, and think, can we update 1,350 people on one day, the 6th of August? And so the answer that we are really hearing is no, we can't do that. So we started having discussions with lots of different groups, started kind of with our leadership group, again, based on the feedback that we were hearing. We met with GCA's leadership group and said, hey, what do you think about this? And they supported the idea, so we kind of took it to the next step, visiting with some principals. If we do this, is it manageable, is it doable? And the answer continued to be yes. Really the efforts are to support our staff and have the best start that we can to our school year. And if we kept in the traditional language or mode that we had going forward, we didn't think that was going to happen. So we met with GCA when we came up with a memorandum of understanding, which really is changed to contract. So I talked a little bit about calendars, but it's not necessarily about the calendar. It's about stepping outside of the contract language that we currently have. So as I mentioned before, we did have 6 days of in-service that were allocated, and we used those throughout. So we could manipulate those 6 days and front load them, if you will, to look something like this. So just taking the existing days that we had, that's what was allocated according to our negotiated agreement, and we move those to the front of the calendar. So we do take care of prepping and preparing our teachers. But if we use those 4 days, according to the language, that just gives us 2 days left. So you spread those out in the remaining part of the year, which takes you to the first part of January, and then not again until April. So in this plan, although we have lots of people participating in the plan, we think we have a great plan. If we created an opportunity to prepare our staff with the current language, giving us 6 days, we wouldn't be able to get anybody together again until January. Long time period. So the memorandum of understanding allows us to change the language in the contract from those 6 days. We would take 4 student contact days and change those to in-service days. So now that number is from 6 to 10, which will enable us to spread out collaboration time for our staff, again, make it ongoing for them as a supportive piece throughout the school year as things change with our plan and our community, possibly with instructional models. It will give us an opportunity to touch base as we're moving forward. The other thing that the memorandum addresses is our student contact time. And so, again, we're thinking that we're going to have increased absences with our students. We're going to have maybe a lot of kids that are going to be working remotely. And so having a time where our teachers can reach out to them or touch base with those kids that are doing it remotely, we would cut down on our student instruction time by 15 minutes. That would allow for more plan time for our staff, which would get them started, reaching out and making contact with those kids. So we would essentially shorten our instruction day by 15 minutes. So this is the actual memorandum you should have a copy of. So for the purpose of this agreement, the teacher's duty day shall be 7 hours and 30 minutes. That's not changed. The 6 hours and 25 minutes would be the student contact time, still allocating 30 minutes before the student contact day, 35 minutes at the end of the day. That was typically the 20 minutes during that time. And again, the number of days that were allocated would change to no more than 10 in-service days, and the previous language in our contract was 6. So if you ratify this and accept this, there will be some impact to the calendar. So this is the examples that it could impact. So we would take those days, again, 4 days, front load those. That would move our start time back. We originally started on the 10th with students, which was a half day. We'll move our start time or start date to the 17th. We did have new teachers reporting the first part of this week, so we moved that back and took a new teacher day and put it down here in November. So new teachers report on the 6th and 7th. We front load 4 in-service days, the 10th to the 13th. That's going to give us an opportunity to get our staff in the buildings and do that prep work that we talked about. 14th is a work day. And then the conversion days, student contact days, we've tried to spread those out with the addition of the 2 that we already had allocated and tried to approach it from a monthly standpoint. We started in the middle of September. Our thinking behind that was we would have roughly a month of school. So as again, we think this plan is going to be great, but there's going to be a need to tweak and to look at it. So after a month of school, what things do we have that are going really well? What things need to be tweaked? It would give us an opportunity to have staff together. So that's 14th of September. And then here's another in-service day that would be utilized, the 15th of October. It's paired by a work day right before parent-teacher conferences. We inserted one here in November. We chose not to utilize one in December because of the short month. This would be what I would call fairly traditional. So we do have one in January that we left. Also in February, we put that up next to the work day that was existing. We skipped March because we have a break there at the spring break. And then we kept this, the Good Friday would be an in-service day on the 2nd. And we did not do May with it being the last month of school. So although this is, again, a language change in the calendar or a language change in the contract, it will have an impact on the calendar itself. So the board would have the authority to rearrange the days as long as it met the negotiated agreement. That would be true. We went through a calendar process that was ratified by the teachers, ratified by the board. And so with this being a language change, then we vetted that with a few groups. I mentioned GCA was one of them. We had a principals group. We did take it to the calendar committee as well, just as a process. What you see with this idea, they actually made a suggestion to change their September date. We had it in the middle of the week, and they suggested moving it to the front of the week to help community and parents in terms of daycare issues. But once we went through that process, it had to go to a vote of the teachers because it was a change in their contract. So we did that last week. So we had 363 votes, 320 voted yes to accept the memorandum of understanding on the language change, 43 no's. So tonight we're asking the board to ratify or accept the MOU. It's for 1 year only. And then, of course, approve calendars that would impact in terms of changing those languages. What questions can I answer?
I don't know if this is really relevant, but I'm just curious. Compared to the number of teachers that voted for this versus the normal, when they vote for the calendar? What was the numbers?
I don't know the answer to that.
Similar?
Gage is gonna,
I don't need specifics, I just wanted to know. He said this is very similar. I was just curious what participation was compared to.
yeah, I actually think probably the participation in terms of the number of votes are probably higher for this, actually.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's what I was-
286 or something sticks in my mind for some reason.
Actually, we had 381
Calendar or contract?
contracts.
So that was for the contract.
Yeah, that was,
Yeah. Yeah, I think the calendar was maybe a little less than that.
I don't know, it really wasn't all of it, anything, I was just curious.
But I think good participation, and again, thank you for that, because it reminds me, we did have another vetting process. Once we came up with the language, of course, had to go through legal for KNEA and also the board's attorney. Then we did have 2 informational meetings that we set up via Zoom. Gail and GCA invited me to participate in those, so I got to sit, kind of go through, again, language change and impacts that would have on the calendar and answer questions for staff. We did those at 2 different settings, with pretty high participation, close to 100 the first night, and I think 50 maybe the second morning that we did it. So we had an evening and a morning opportunity.
And for classified staff, how are you approaching?
Yeah, so 2 of the calendars that you have will be for classified staff. So the para calendar will be for the board to approve as well. There'll be some changes in terms of start time because this is moving back, but the number of days that we're having, and we're trying to keep those so we're not harming anybody from what the original calendar was. So I think I told the board, Dr. Carlin told the board maybe last week, there'll be at least two more calendars coming, but we're giving those departments an opportunity to look to see, can they utilize the days that they would be short? An example of that would be nutrition services. They only work when students are there because they're feeding kids. So because we're cutting down on those days, they could potentially be impacted, but that department head is looking at ways to use those days in a different way. Training, in-service, those kinds of things, maybe making meals for kids even on the non-contact days. So that's why they're not here tonight, because we're still working through some details.
Dana, do you have a question?
Well, we need then a motion to approve the memorandum of understanding. Is that the correct way of saying it?
I believe this.
And the revised calendars.
And the revised calendars. So I would make that motion.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve the revised calendars that are being presented and the MOU with GCEA. Any discussion? The one comment I had looking at this is sitting on the negotiations committee every year, it seems like one of the concerns when we had so many days up front is it's too much. So I did address that with Dr. Carlin, and I think that was discussed, but, I mean, that was my only concern
Sure.
with, the calendar that we had. So, and I appreciate GCEA for moving as quickly as they did to review all of this in the calendar committee.
Yeah, it's been very supportive, and we did address something like that in our informational meetings too. And the things I talked about staff that attended those was you have to look at it in service differently. And so maybe in the past, it's been a lot of things where I won't necessarily say just sit and get, but typically Dr. Carlin is going to do a welcome at the beginning of the year. We're going to have a speaker on the first day, and then they're going to do some in-service along the way. This is going to look a lot different. Number one, we're not going to congregate everybody together like that, so that in and of itself is different. But secondly is the information we provided tonight in terms of plan, that's going to take a lot of work, and it will be just slightly different in every one of our facilities. So getting people into the buildings and spending that time is going to be different. So it's in service because we can count it as in service because it's collaboration, but their work will be less sit and get unless they request it, like Edgenuity as an example. If I need more training with Edgenuity, me and my colleagues, we don't feel like we're ready for that, they can set that up on their own, but that's not something that will be dictated necessarily by the district. So it'll look different than what maybe it has in the past.
Mark, I saw you flash up for a second. Did you have a question?
No, Madam Chair, just listening and anticipating a vote.
Okay. Dr. Carlin?
Yeah, thank you. I may just make a quick comment, kind of reiterate, he said, this really came from teachers. It's really intended to support our teachers. And I want to really thank GCA. This conversation started probably less than 3 weeks ago. And to be able to bring all the moving parts together to get this to the point that we have a proposal in front of you tonight with pretty overwhelming support from our teachers, I really think makes a statement in itself. So, and there are a lot of moving parts that have had to be looked at and considered, and lots of other opportunities for input along the way. So, Gil and your team, thank you for your work on that. One thing I think was mentioned, but just so it doesn't get lost, this is a 1-year thing too. This is a reaction to the COVID thing. And now if we find things that are working well, they can always be discussed in negotiations going forward, if that's the pleasure of the groups. But what we're asking the board to approve is just a 1-year thing. The other thing on the timing is bringing this to you and asking you for a pretty quick turnaround. We still are about a month before school would start. So we will begin tomorrow, if this is approved, we will begin tomorrow with getting this word out, communicating this piece of things to parents and students, because there is a little bit of an impact for them. They're going to start a week later. Many will probably think that's positive. Some may not, but we will be getting that information out if the board approves this tonight. So, thanks.
Any other discussion or comments? Well, all those in favor of the MOU and the proposed calendars, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's passed. And I believe that takes us to board open discussion. Mark, since you're on the video right now, I'm going to start with you.
Madam Chair, thank you. I won't say too much. I do apologize for not being there in person and appreciate try to keep video off just to minimize distractions. But I am impressed how everybody comes through on the audio, even talking to them. A lot of work, obviously, put into the material we heard. None of it. I certainly with Dana's comments about the concern of information overload in a short amount of time. But I, for one, have been very appreciative of sitting in on the Tuesday vision meetings. I just have to say, again, it's impressive to hear a lot of smart minds working together, trying to identify everything that must be considered. And we won't get everything, but to prepare for our mission to educate our kids and keeping our kids and our staff safe. I think we're going to do it. Dr. Hannigan's comments and his challenges with staff will certainly have those as well. But the communication, I think, is very good. And so I'm pretty optimistic. Thank you for the time to make comments.
Thank you, Mark. Dr. Hannigan?
I don't really have anything else.
Janine?
Thank you. I had the honor to be able to go to the graduation for the alternate school this weekend, and, you think it's going to look a little bit different because of the social distancing and all of those things, and it looked a little bit different than it normally would, but it was very nice. I feel like it was very personal for the kids too, and it was just really cool to be able to be part of that and see the kids that had worked that hard for to be able to graduate and to be able to do everything that they want to do and keep going forward. Just kind of brought a lot of hope, and I know that the COVID pandemic has been really hard on people, but to be able to see how many of the cogs that are working together and all of the different people that are collaborating and everybody's input being put into it is truly amazing to me. And I appreciate all of the work that's been put into it from administration and teachers and parents and just everybody that's been involved. It's just, I'm in awe of everything that's going on and being able to do that. And I just very much appreciate it and thank you for all your work. Dana?
Yep, I would just, I didn't go to the graduation, but I would just reiterate, thank you for all of your work, everybody. It's really awesome to see all the groups working together as we should, and I look forward to seeing how this all plays out. Thanks, Jennifer and Mark, for serving on the board as well and giving extra time. Appreciate it. So, keep up the good work. 457 strong. Jennifer?
I just want to give a little bit of a shout out to all the programs that were going on this summer. Food nutrition, I think that went real well, keeping kids fed this summer. When issues came up, it was taken care of, but kids still got fed, and those people that were in the kitchens and the teachers that helped pass out lunches, I think I was really excited that we got to do that. And also to the, middle school and high school sports and activities that were going on this summer. They found ways to get the kids out and being active, and I think in the weight room and maybe playing some sports still. And I heard it sounded like things went well, and we really didn't have any issues having to. But I still want to say thank you, because we need to acknowledge that there were procedures put in place that made it work and to keep kids safe and to keep our coaches safe. So, again, knock on wood that it stayed that way, but I really must have been planned out well, because I think it's been good, and it was important to keep kids active this summer. So I think that keeps them healthy too. So I think we need to keep that in mind as we come into the school year.
Yeah, I like to say do, being last kind of helps me out, but I like to say do, everybody else say I appreciate all the hard work. Some of the questions I ask, and then you dive deeper into it, I'm like, gosh, how are you not thinking of that? The next step, and you guys continually solve that problem, and you solve that problem, and solve that problem. So it's amazing the teamwork that you guys have, and we can witness that. I also got to be a part of the GC alternative program graduation this weekend, and that was a different look than serving on the board in the past and having out diplomas one after another, and we were able to handle it well and take turns to sanitize and greet the kids. I don't know if it was sanitized or nervous sweat when we got to shake their hands, but we still had fun regardless, and it was a very nice turnout, and I'm glad I got to be a part of that. But great work to everybody, and the work that you're also doing with the Benton County Health Department and keeping us apprised and up to date as much as you can to make us have our conscious decisions. Thank you.
I just wanted to also let you all know that July 23rd from 6 to 7:30, if you are interested, KSB's Region 10, there's groups like 3 regions together, but we're Region 10, and that's ours. But there's a couple of other Zoom ones as well where they're going to be talking about the KSDE plan and all of that kind of stuff. So if you wanted an opportunity to talk with other school districts and seeing how they're doing things and maybe bring back some new ideas for our team before we have the presentation on the 27th, I would encourage you to participate in that. It's free, but I think you do have to register. So probably let Stephanie know if you're interested in that. So it's the 21st, 22nd, and 23rd from 6 to 7:30 if anyone's interested in that. And I'll just echo what everyone else has said, and thank you for all the collaboration and working through all the problems. So not just the staff in here, but the teachers and the parents and everyone for problem solving. Thank you so much for your time and dedication. So we can hopefully get these kiddos back in school in some form or fashion starting in August. So, although you did make a liar out of me, because I told somebody in a training, they asked, when's school starting? I'm like, August 10th. And they kept on asking that. I'm like, it's August 10th. And then they said, the follow-up question is where? I'm like, I don't know where, but it's August 10th. Then I have to go back. So thanks a lot.
Yeah, that was true of today.
Yeah. So thank you all. The next Board of Education meeting will be July 27th at 6 p.m. Theoretically, right now here, oh, I'm sorry, I guess I should let you talk too, huh?
Throw a couple things in.
Okay.
Thanks. Wednesday, we have a media event, reading roadmap, did some research on our after-school program. We had at 5 elementary schools. The results were really phenomenal. And, so we're gonna share the study that was done and some information around that. 10 o'clock, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and so that's, really gonna be kind of fun to be able to share that. At the next meeting, you will get a proposal to utilize some of the CARES funding that the district qualifies for as a result of the COVID, that will incorporate, keeping that after-school program as a way to kind of fill the gap for some of our kids that fell behind, and we think we've got some really strong evidence that says that's a good approach. We applied for a couple of grants, 3 grants. We got one of them, which pays for a very small part of it, but the CARES money will give us an avenue to fund that program for another year, and we'll continue to monitor it and then probably look for other ways to keep that going. Janine and Alex both mentioned we're in graduation season now. Kind of seems funny in July, but it does still have the same feel when you get to graduation. A couple of things for the public's benefit. We only had 2 board members on the stage at graduation for the Alternate Education Center, and we'll only have 2 on the stage at each of the ceremonies. We'll have 4 different ceremonies at Garden City High School. I think it's important the public understands we would have more board members participating in each ceremony, but we're doing that because there's not enough room to socially distance and follow the guidelines that the health department is asking us to follow to keep people safe. This weekend at Garden City High School, I know Mr. Nordby had worked closely with parents, with families, and graduates about what their desires were for graduation, and their desires were to have it as normal as possible. In the gym, walking across the stage, shaking hands, that kind of stuff. Well, a few sacrifices have to be made with all the COVID circumstances. One of those is we couldn't fill the gym. We got to go with smaller groups. We've got to seat our families as groups and socially distance between them, and we've got to have people wear masks during the ceremony. The kids will take the masks off when they cross the stage. The board members that are present will take their masks off when they present diplomas. We do pictures. We will still get to shake hands with with enough hand sanitizer for everybody. But there's a few things that we're having to do differently, and we're doing it basically by academies. So we'll have a graduation Friday night. We'll have 2 on Saturday, 1 in the morning, 1 in the evening, and then we'll have 1 Sunday afternoon. So again, trying to recognize the accomplishments of the class of 2020. And if last Saturday was any indication, it was still a rousing success. So thanks to those of you who are going to be participating, but also those of you who have sacrificed and you're not going to be able to be with every graduate this year. I know that board typically enjoys that. So that was it. Thanks.
Yeah, you cut our pay dramatically.
Yeah.
Steve, on the first event, that media event, is that a Zoom or is it in person?
No, we're doing it here, but we're going to be doing masks and kind of limiting, I think, the number. Is in this room? Yes. Yeah.
Are you gonna send an invite to the board?
We can. Yeah, we'll send that out. Yep.
Or I guess I could put it in what time, if it's.
It's at 10 on Wednesday. But we can send out the information on it first thing in the morning.
Yeah, I've really liked, watching all the stuff this summer. Anyone else? So the next Board of Education meeting will take place on Monday, July 27th, 2020 at 6 p.m. in a location to be determined, contrary to what the agenda says, somewhere in Garden City, Kansas.
Yep.
So, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Seconded.
Alex moved, Janine seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Or log off. Opposed? Okay, thank you very much. Have a great day.
Thanks, Mark, drive safe.
Good.